Okay, it says Dr. King, together with his SCLC staff, that's the Southern Christian Leadership Council, returned to Memphis on April 3rd, 1968 at 10:30 a.m. At a press conference at the airport, the group proceeded to the Lorraine Motel, arriving there at approximately 11:20 a.m. At about 12:05 p.m., Dr. King left the Lorraine Motel for a meeting at the Centenary Methodist Church. Security and surveillance reports of G.P. Tynes, inspector, Memphis Police Department, dated July 17th, 1968. So that date is after King's date, but it was security surveillance following and telling Dr. King. Dr. King announced at this meeting that his purpose in returning to Memphis was to lead a mass march on April the 8th, 1968. So he was planning a march 4 days after the day he was assassinated. However, on April 3rd, 1968, the United States District Court Judge Bailey Brown issued a temporary restraining order against further marches in Memphis. So now you got the judge signing these restraining orders. Hey, you guys can't march anymore, and you can't do this, do that, because the peaceful protest more than likely was infiltrated, and then you had it started to unfold and unravel, and then it became not so peaceful. So now the judge then issued this temporary restraining order. All right, so it says Dr. King returned to the Lorraine Motel at 2:25 p.m. and sometime afternoon, federal marshals served him and his sides with a restraining order. And here you go, in parentheses again, security and surveillance report of G.P. Tynes, an inspector of Memphis Police Department. At approximately 4 p.m., Dr. King and the SCLC staff, Dr. King agreed to use his influence to secure funds for the BOP, and Reverend Andrew Young agreed to help write up a plan. It is believed that the concessions were made to BOP in order to keep them in line and prevent them from following a violent pattern. And then you got to realize that some of these groups, yeah, some of the leaders in these groups are probably, okay or whatnot. But you got to remember these people are, young and they're new at organizing, and they just want to get quantity over quality. So when you start to do that, you start to have people come in the movement that are actually working against the movement. So on the night of April 3rd, 1968, Dr. King spoke to approximately 2,000 persons at the Masons Temple again. He emphasized the scheduled mass march must be held on April the 8th, 1968, and refocus attention on the 8-week-old sanitation workers strike. Okay, so they were still organizing around that strike. After the speech, Solomon Jones Jr., serving as Dr. King's chauffeur, drove him back to the Lorraine Motel. Dr. King told Jones to report back on Thursday morning, April the 4th, 1968, 8:30 a.m., because he had to appear in court in connection with that restraining order. At approximately 6 p.m., Dr. King and Reverend Abernathy started to leave room 306. Reverend Abernathy stopped for a moment, and Dr. King walked out onto the balcony just outside of the door to the room. He saw Jones standing beside the car and on the ground level and began a conversation about the weather. Jones advised Dr. King that he should put on a top coat as it was cool outside. During the conversation, Dr. King was facing west, Jones was facing east, and looking up at Dr. King from the ground level as Dr. King acknowledged Jones' concern about getting his coat. Jones heard a sound which he thought was a firecracker, and Dr. King fell to the floor of the balcony in front of room 306. Jones immediately called for help, and a number of Dr. King's aides who were either in their rooms or standing in the courtyard rushed to his aid. It was some other prominent people that were there, and it just seems that the 11 years, you noticing that they're just still going with the AIDS stuff, Dr. King's AIDS, instead of, listing the names. That's quite funny. These names are being left out of the document. FBI informant Robert G. Jensen, the special agent in charge of the Memphis field office, and Joseph Hester, case agent for Merkin, have unequivocally assured the task force that there were no electronic surveillance of Dr. King in Memphis, which was a lie. We can go back and see where they were saying they was watching him go to this Masonic temple, watching him go to this church, and have these speeches in Memphis. It was explained that Memphis was not in the mainstream of Dr. King's SCLC activities. Interview of Special Agent Joe Hester on June 23rd, 1976. However, FBI agents did observe the sanitation workers strike. Okay, so they all hands off. They all hands off. We ain't had no camera footage. We ain't had none of that. Come on, man. Come on, man. What y'all think? We dumb? I think we slow. Come on, man. They did the same thing, man. They was following Big in LA up until he got shot. Following Pop since he was a baby up until he got shot. They was following Martin, Malcolm. All of these people they were following up until they got shot. Come on now. The same thing keep happening over and over and over again. Come on now. Oh, okay. Our investigation disclosed that there were 5 paid confidential informants providing intelligence regarding the racial situations to the Memphis field office on a continuing basis. 5 paid confidential informants. Why we can't have their names now? Is these declassified documents that's set to come out? Are they going to drop the names? Are they going to drop the names? Is it still confidential after 50 years? After 50 years, ain't it some kind of stipulation on information? Okay. So the intelligence coverage provided by these individuals related to the activities of the Nation of Islam, Black Students Association of MSU, Students for a Democratic Society, Black Organizer Power, Black United Front, Afro-American Brotherhood, Invaders, and Sanitation Workers Strike. You would think that these people were terrorists of some sort. You doing all this infiltrating. Can't nobody infiltrate these other groups, these other hate groups. I ain't even talking about this. Was a non-violent person. You decided to put plants all around him. But why is the U.S. government afraid to put plants around all of these organized hate groups? You know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking a lot of prominent people will be outed. Not saying famous, but what I mean by prominent is prominent people from the legal system. You have judges, you'll have law enforcement, police officers, you have your everyday run-of-the-mill government officials outed in these groups. That's why y'all can't put no plants in those organizations, because it will uncover the true nature of systemic racism and how it works. Come on, y'all. The only thing I hate is that the outlandish people, the bigots, they're basically like the cover for these low-key snake in the grass, hiding in sheep's clothing racists that exist. Because I understand people deal, like I said, with surface shit. So they only see racism as somebody walking down the street with a Klan mask on, or walking down the street with this, that, and the third, something that blatantly says, oh, the new thing is if you got a MAGA hat, you a racist, you know what I'm saying? Stuff like that. That's how people are describing racism. Not me personally. I'm just saying. All of that's the distraction. The distraction is who's signing those policies, those legislations, who's protecting these individuals from being infiltrated, just like they infiltrated Dr. King right here and had plants around. They can't have plants around those hate groups. And I ain't gonna give them no shine, but they can't have no plants around them. Man, you know how many people that's on the Board of Education, mayor list, doctors, judges, lawyers, attorneys, detention officers, correction officers. You know how many of those people would be actually outed? It would probably cripple some of these towns. So I'm with it. Pull the Band-Aid off. Let us see who they really are. You know what I'm saying? We need to call for the government to start putting these confidential informants in these hate groups. Okay, MPD, which is Memphis Police Department, infiltration of the invaders. There you go, right there. Remember, we was talking about people writing invaders on their shirt. In addition to the paid FBI informants and officer of the MPD infiltrated the invaders in an undercover operation. The officer, who was later exposed and is no longer with MPD, was interviewed by the task force. The undercover assignment began in February of 68 for the specific purpose of infiltrating the invaders, who became active about the same time of the sanitation workers' strike. So the invaders became active right around the time of the sanitation workers' strike. So you mean to tell me this group more likely became active in February of 68 and they already had somebody infiltrating the movement that was on payroll? That was hella quick.